Ladies and gentlemen, I am StooDogg, and we're here today with Kadenza to talk about Star Trek TNG episode Up the Long Ladder. Was that the name of it? Or have I screwed this up?
Oh yeah, we're back in season 2, and this time, instead of talking about an episode that everybody's heard of, or that everybody likes from season 2, we're kind of talking about one that we don't necessarily like that much. I don't know. Before we get started, what was your impression of the episode?
I mean, it's pretty cringe at times, and I do get the feeling that there's a lot of fluff, and this goes back to when they had to have that 45 minutes for like being on screen to get the hour with ad breaks in it. Not like today when with the streaming treks where they're purely just released on streaming platforms where they can vary between like 38 minutes long all the way up to like an hour and 2 minutes long, just depending on, they make their episode as long as it needs to be these days. But this one, it just felt like it had some random fluff and filler added in just to make up that extra time.
Yeah, there's a reason that season 2 is, and season 1 and season 2 definitely have Gene Roddenberry's like hand over them a lot more, because he was still alive, and I feel like when you say it's cringe, like I know which parts you're talking about. Specifically, everything with Riker in this episode was pretty.
Oh God,
was pretty cringe. I don't know if you'd call this completely out of character because Riker is a horn dog, but it doesn't really make sense from the perspective of these are the spacefaring, elevated human beings. These are the next generation. Like they have these lofty ideals, and here we have the second in command running around after some tail for half the episode.
Which is absolutely and utterly an unprofessional portrayal of him.
I feel like it is. It's it kind of lends itself more towards like classic Trek and their view on women and how women were kind of treated in the first 2 seasons of TNG. And we're not the first ones to point out that some of the things that come up is I guess we should really just like start from the beginning so that we don't get too far ahead. But needless to say, like this episode kind of made me cringe, and I wanted to talk about it because I don't often find an episode of The Next Generation that I don't enjoy on some level. And the only good thing I can say is that I feel like this concept for the episode is like much better on paper than in this execution.
As far as science fiction goes, the science element of the fiction is pretty strong in this one.
Oh yeah, I'm not really sure what the actual name of the episode is implying. Up the Long Ladder, but I guess we'll get into that, and maybe we can draw some conclusions later about what that might mean.
Totally, man. Yeah, so the Enterprise arrives at Starbase when they find out that the Starbase had received a distress call about a month before. But they hadn't done anything, and they were confused as to what the distress call was. But then Riker identifies it as being an SOS from like Federation, pre-Starfleet Earth kind of era.
Right, and I'd like to point out that it's kind of strange how Picard goes about informing Riker of the situation. He just like plays the distress signal, is like, what do you think? And Riker's like, oh, it sounds like an SOS, I don't know, like, and he kind of leads him to the answer, but it was really weird seeing Picard do that, because most of the time he just comes right out and says what he knows.
So I just wanted to check something here. I wanted to check the listing of episodes of The Next Generation, because I think there was an episode around about that time where Riker gets offered a command And I'm wondering if that was maybe a sort of like a command kind of test thing, that maybe behind the scenes Picard was reporting back to somebody and being like, "Oh yeah, this guy's good. He could totally be a captain."
Well, he recognizes an obscure SOS signal that is not even used anymore in like the past century. But, I'm sure if anybody's listening that is into Star Trek, like you know that, the Federation is kind of the end point of humanity's story in that setting. But they go through World War III, and there's a bunch of eugenics and weird, like, science gone mad sort of things. Like,
Gone.
exactly. Khan being one of the eugenics, and like, it's weird. I got some weird, like, Khan flashbacks with some of the stuff in this episode, but yeah,
That's the thing. It was touched on in the original series as well. There was this dude called Colonel Green. It's an obscure, like, late season 3 episode of the original series, where this dude's literally just on screen for seconds, like a historical recreation of him. But he was a sort of one of the eugenics guys as well, where that's sort of the. I don't want to say it, man, but I'm gonna have to. It was like Clone Wars kind of thing. Like they were genetically engineering like clones to go and fight for them.
Hey, it's not a bad idea if you want to raise an army really quickly to clone them, but let's save the Star Wars comparisons, because oh man, like,
Let's not turn to the dark side.
yeah, exactly. We'll have a bunch of keyboard warriors in the comments telling us that we're wrong, So Picard is telling Riker about, this signal, and he guesses what it is, and they don't know, like, right away exactly what it is, because they can't find any ship in the quadrant where this signal is coming from, like, in the old, like, pre-Vulcan contact, days, right? Like, and they mentioned the European
the European hegemony, where it was
hard word.
the foundations of the New World government kind of thing. I think they said it was around about 2130ish. So that would set it before the events of Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah, but that would mean it would be post-Vulcan contact, right? But weren't the Vulcans, like, keeping humanity from spreading out? I think we found a plot hole.
I think to an extent they were, but if you've got, like, a parent who's looking after you, and you're an unruly kid who knows better, you're going to find ways to do things to sneak them past and drop those colony ships out that have sort of early warp drives, and kind of hide it under the rug, because they were saying that they were finding difficulties getting notes of the actual launches of the ships from the time.
Right, and then I forget. I just want to point out. At the start of the episode, the first thing we see is, like, Worf on the bridge, and he's just like, he has this look on his face like he is about to take a mean shit, like he's
proper gurning.
he is definitely mean mugging the camera, and that basically goes nowhere. After Riker and Picard have that meeting,
when they come out of the ready room, he's just lying there on the deck.
Yeah, and then the music swells, and it's like
he collapsed.
What happened? He just collapsed out of nowhere. And then it turns out he has, like, the Klingon version of the chicken pox.
Yeah, so he's all arguing with Pulaski, who's like, "So you collapsed? Like, Klingons do not collapse."
My honor has been sullied by the Klingon chicken pox.
Like, okay, well, you had an issue, your blood pressure got a little bit high, then you became unconscious.
It happens, yeah. And Picard wants to know, like, hey, what's up with Worf? And Worf is like, he's basically...
Well, Pulaski says to Picard, which this is a massive violation of doctor-patient confidentiality, right? Picard just being like, oh yeah, so how is he? Which is like, oh, he was just observing some obscure Klingon fasting ritual, and he didn't realize that, if you're not going to eat, you should lower your physical exertion rate as well, because you're not taking in enough calories to do stuff.
I like that, though, because she lies to Picard just because Worf is, like, too embarrassed about, why he actually collapsed. But
This
you're right.
dishonor on my house!
You're totally right, though. It's like, not only is it a major breach of, patient-doctor confidentiality, it's also, like, isn't she supposed to be honest with the captain? Like, she can just tell little white lies and get away with it, I guess? Yeah, it's weird. This whole episode is written that way, where, like, characters will do something, and it kind of makes sense in the moment, but the more you think about it, it's like, what? Like, what are we doing here? So they answered the distress call after they find...
Yeah, so they head out.
How do they find it? It's on a manifest of some kind, but...
Yeah, so Data finds records of the ship being loaded, and he finds this ship called the Mariposa, and there's like lines that he comes out with here that it goes back into the whole... they're struggling to fill this episode, right? So he's just like, oh, Captain, the ship was called the Mariposa, which is Spanish for butterfly. Like, thank you, Data. I just thought that might be relevant. Like, probably not, Data, but thank you anyway. And he finds the records of the ship being loaded, and it's full of computer equipment and high-tech stuff at the time, and spinning wheels.
Yeah, like, they find the manifest just full of, like, advanced technology, and then, like, pre-industrial revolution technology, and it's like, why did they have all this? And they find out...
And then Data's like, what is a spinning wheel? Accessing. He just starts, like, giving out the dictionary definition of a spinning wheel, because they're struggling to fill the episode with stuff.
It is that, it's like, Data has always been kind of like, a Wikipedia article about everything. He just pops off sometimes about stuff, but in these scenes...
It does fit in with his character, but
it does.
It does kind of... He goes into this, like... Yeah, Worf had measles for no reason.
And then Pulaski lied for no reason. And, it's like, you think... how they set up a classic episode is like, here's the A plot, here's the B plot. So you think that Worf having measles is gonna, like, be the B plot. But no, it just ends. And then there's, like, one mention of it.
Yeah, it ends in the very next scene, after we find out about the computers and the spinning wheels being sent on the ship that went out into deep space.
Coincidentally, that next scene is the only, like, it's one of the only things I like about this episode, because Worf and Pulaski have been kind of antagonistic to each other throughout the whole season a little bit, like, just because they have very different perspectives on issues. Worf being the warrior, he always wants to kill something, and then Pulaski being the doctor, like, she just wants to save people. And I think the tea scene is actually very interesting. Like, I didn't...
So, one of the first things that I picked up on as, like, random StooDogg fact, he studied bacterial... I can't even say it now. Bacteriology about 20 odd years ago. Didn't use that qualification for anything, but I studied it anyway. And Worf just walks into sickbay with poisonous tea.
Yeah.
A place where, like, people who are ill injured or whatever, and you've brought bloody poison in. Like, are you mental?
I feel like Pulaski, like, does she even have quarters? Did they ever bother to make a set for Pulaski's quarters? Because I feel like that would have been a lot more sensible if he just showed up.
Sensible than going into the main body of sickbay, like kind of outside of her office area, going essentially like into an area where ill and injured people would rock up. Imagine if he spilled a bit of the tea somewhere, and somebody like came in from engineering, and you see these episodes where they're covered in burns because they fell into a plasma injector or whatever, and then it's like, oh no, his entire body's just gone septic. It's some kind of a Klingon toxin. That's Worf in his tea.
I guess he just happened to know that Pulaski has the antidote on hand at all times. Because she, like, I don't know what Worf was expecting. Did he expect her to drink the tea? Or was he just bringing it as, like, a formality of, like, thank you for helping me or whatever? But he didn't actually expect her to drink the tea, did he?
I think it was just the kind of the formality of it being there, because he said, you must not drink the tea because it is fatal to humans.
Yeah, and she says it's not even good for Klingons, and then he goes into this. This is the only part that I like. I mean, this is one of the scenes I like, and I'm kind of picking it apart, but like, Worf goes into this diatribe about how, death is a experience best shared, and that's what the tea ceremony is about. It's about Klingons, like, bonding over near-death experiences, like poisoning
Got that
themselves.
written down there. Death is an experience best shared.
Yeah, and Pulaski calls Worf a romantic, and we know from Deep Space Nine that he really is just a big softie on the inside.
And then she ends up by, like, they do the tea ceremony, and she's like, tell me some more of those, like, Klingon poetry lines.
Yeah, it's oddly like romantic between the two of them for a second. But of course that never goes anywhere because Pulaski leaves as soon as Beverly Crusher gets done with whatever she's doing.
And having just checked the episode list, because I was wanting to know when that episode where he was offered the command was, it was just a few episodes before. So I'm guessing that's not really the reason for the whole quizzing of Riker.
Picard is off in this whole episode, though. Like, Picard's
unless the episodes were like shown out of order or something, but I don't know. Filmed out of order or whatever.
But you know what I mean? It just I feel like Patrick Stewart was kind of just like reading lines at some points in this episode, like when they get to the colony, or the
so I was just going to say there that there's only another 4 episodes of season 2, and then at the start of season 3 is when Beverly comes back. So Pulaski's only in this for the next 4 episodes.
I actually like Pulaski's character. It's just a shame that she ended up in like one of the worser seasons. Like it's.
She reminds me of Bones McCoy.
She does. She's got that grit to her. Like that frontier medicine doctor, as Julian Bashir would say.
Doesn't like the transporters.
I don't blame her. I'm surprised more people don't have a fear of the transporters like Lieutenant Barclay did. Okay, this crazy train's off the rails, so let's...
Yeah, so they arrive at the planet, and the term for the people there are neo-transcendentalists. So they get there and they try hailing the planet, but get no response because there's no technology. They scan the place and there's basically nothing, but they detect 200 people. So they send Will down, oddly on his own, which is not Starfleet procedure. You're never supposed to send a man on his own, but we've noted that this episode's got quite a few oddly off the rails parts. So he goes down there, and Picard's like, "Look, we need to get the people off this planet. There's solar flares. It's gonna burn the planet, and they're all gonna die." So Riker goes down, and he hails the ship. He's like, "Yeah, we're having a bit of an argument here with the colony's leader." And Picard's like pressing him, like, "Look, there's no time. Just get them up here now." Like, that's an order, Will, kind of thing. And he's like, but sir, no, get them up. Just no matter what it takes, just do it. So he does. And presumably, this argument Will's having with the colony leader has something to do with agriculture and farming animals, because the next scene in the transporter room, some people beam up along with chickens, at least one goat, a sheep, and you hear a rooster.
That's what I'm saying is, like, the writing in this is so strange, and then it just hits you over the head with something like, pigs on the transporter pad.
And geese in boxes. So O'Brien contacts Picard, and he's like, "Captain, you're gonna want to see this. You're gonna have to come down here." So you see Picard and Worf in the corridor outside the transporter room, and randomly the transporter room door flies open, and a chicken just kind of falls out of it.
I'm not gonna lie, I burst out laughing when I first saw that part. No, it is an absurd kind of episode, to begin with. But these like, what are they called? Neo-transcendentalists? Is that it?
Yeah, as in the word transcend, like transcendent. Yeah. I'm having difficulty saying it as well.
Basically, they're space hippies.
Neo-transcendentalists, yeah.
They want to go back to the old way of things, and it just makes... one thing I was thinking about during this episode is, like, because there's all this technology, that is missing at this point, because, like, these people are primitive. Like, they have no understanding of high technology, despite the fact that they are originally from that period of Earth where things were, post-Vulcan, like, contacts, like, technology.
So I'm thinking that that's part of the reason why these guys wanted to leave, because, I mean, if you could put yourself in the mindset of a people who, over the last, like, before just a little bit ago, they'd seen humanity almost destroy itself by nuclear wars and eugenics wars, and then the post-nuclear holocausts that would happen after that, to use another sort of cheesy phrase, like the fallout
right.
of what would happen after a nuclear war. I'm guessing the Vulcans didn't get involved straight away. Humanity would still have a lot of problems and power vacuums that were being filled, and even up until this, like, European hegemony kind of thing, which was one of the cornerstones of a world government. What other world governments would there have been? And on a scale of nice to genocidal, how good would they have been?
Humanity didn't fix all of its problems overnight. I want to talk about how the concept of this episode is actually very similar to events that happen in the Warhammer 40,000 universe a lot, where basically humanity had this, like, golden age of, like, technology and stuff, but because their space travel depends on them literally going through a hell dimension and then popping out the other side, When they weren't able to do that because hell was literally too hellish to navigate, lots of colonies and planets were just completely lost. Like, no contacts. And as they said in this episode, sometimes they just got lost in the bureaucracy because there were so many planets that were colonized. And this whole thing about establishing contact with a with a planet that has been isolated for hundreds of years, like, it's very similar to what happens in Warhammer a lot.
And I think as well as that, we're looking at, as you were saying, like Roddenberry's hand in Trek here as well, because there's a lot of episodes of the original series where it's about sort of far-flung colonies and outposts being visited, and it's like, oh, there hasn't been a Federation ship here in like 25 years, stuff like that. The episode where No Man Has Gone Before involved a dilithium mine where Federation ships only visited it every 20 years just to pick up the dilithium and take it back to the Federation, kind of thing. It was automated and unmanned, but other episodes you did see like fully manned colonies that were just out there with basically no support from the Federation whatsoever. They just basically had the flag.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a better idea of the scale of space travel, because oftentimes we have the Enterprise going to one important place or another, but they also skip over lots of unimportant places and lots of extremely backwater-like places. And they only get brought to their attention when there's some kind of, overarching thing happening. But this colony being isolated for about 200 years, give or take, is like, it's no... We may laugh at their, not wanting to evacuate without their animals, and I feel like you also have that attitude with the Federation people as well. They're kind of just looking around like, what the hell is this backwater crap? But then, these people have been self-sufficient for over 200 years with no help. Like, maybe there's something to that.
The animals would have been quite important to the society for agriculture. So, if you imagine that the areas that they inhabited on the surface before they had to move underground for protection, that was like their farmlands. So, as well as harvesting your crops, your animals are also sort of useful as fertilizer production machines.
Yes, it's very important. And any like far off colony without support, even in our own history, like, they always took animals with them. And one day, if we actually make it to the stars and we start trying to colonize planets and stuff, we're probably gonna need to bring animals too, because we can't just replicate anything that we need. Stu, you're pretty close to the dialectic of these people, but is it just me, or like, is this kind of racist? Is this a little bit like poking fun at the Irish? Because they're all a bunch of Irish hillbillies. Like, it's not even subtle about it.
It is very sort of like the potato farmer stereotype kind of thing.
It's very heavy-handed. I don't know if it goes as far as being like, it's definitely not presented in a hateful way, but it's kind of presented in like an ignorant sort of way, and that's why I feel like this episode has a lot of Gene Roddenberry influence in it, because Gene is not known for being like the most subtle of his depictions
the
of other
Irish
cultures.
Jig music over it and everything.
It's like you feel like you're in The Witcher or something, like, it's...
The women have to do everything whilst the men try to solve the problems and drink all the beer.
So they move everybody into a cargo hold.
And the dude, I can't remember his first name, but I think his surname was Mr. Odell.
Mr. Odell.
Yes, so he speaks to Picard, and he's just like, "Thanks very much for rescuing me. As in the way of return, would you like to marry my daughter?"
And Picard's like, solicitations.
They very promptly set the cargo bay on fire because they're trying to cook.
Yeah, they set them in there with no food or water, and they're just like, I don't know what to do with these cabbage people, you know, like. So they try to make some food, and Picard goes in there because they start a fire, right, to cook something, and he's like, "Bloody hell, Picard!"
The ship's
Lightning
fire
bolts.
suppression system goes off. Yeah,
Lightning bolts falling from the sky. Like, oh Jesus! It really shows you these people.
What if I was standing underneath that thing? And Worf's like, "You would be inside the fire." It's like, yeah, but if I wasn't, it's like, you would suffocate.
So it's weird because these people are not like mystified by high technology, but they also don't really understand it.
So yeah, the girl, Mr. Odell's daughter, is there, and Riker's little eyes just light right up as she starts yelling at him and Picard and Worf.
Yeah, she comes over and is just like basically complaining about how, you know, they didn't get any food, and as soon as they try to make their own, the ship's suppression system goes off, you know, and it's like, these people have very different priorities, but this woman is obviously somebody who kind of keeps the group, like, she thinks about the group, you know, despite this depiction of her being kind of like this, you know, crazy stereotype. Like, I can understand why at the end of the episode, like, they need her to, like, stay.
Yeah, she is like the matriarch kind of person, so she's someone that the people will listen to and will follow when things need to be done, sort of thing.
Right, she lights a fire under everyone's ass, so
as well as lighting fires that you know, burn down the cargo bay.
Yeah, I don't think they understand that they would run out of air real quick in there, but like, it's just crazy to me how, like, you start out the episode and it just, something feels off because of the way everything's being presented. But this mystery about this ship that went missing is very interesting. And then we're met with Irish stereotype farmer people. And it kind of just goes off the rails from there. Like, and I forget if there's any other filler.
Picard bursts out laughing, and he just finds it all quite amusing. And I think it's to Riker, he just says, number one, sometimes you just need to bow to the absurd.
It is an absurd situation, you know? But then I think the Mr. Adele, was it? He said, in all your travels, Captain, have you ever heard from the other colony?
They're just like, other colony? But before that, I've got noted down here that Riker goes on the pool. And the girl's like, yeah, where does a lady go to clean her feet around here?
Yeah, and he's like, it's my duty as first officer to show you all the amenities. Like, jeez. Riker is...
And she's quite fiery as well, and Worf comments like, she's like a Klingon woman.
Well, he's not wrong. At least we know Riker has a type.
The ship cleans itself. It's like, oh, well, that's good for the bloody ship then.
I didn't understand that part. Like, does trash just dematerialize on the floor or something?
You drop an important, like, document or a piece of paper or something, and it just gets beamed out into space randomly.
I'm just imagining, like, people on the Enterprise, like, you know, finishing a soda or something, and then just dropping it on the floor, and it just disappears, and like that's everyone on the Enterprise is just extremely like litter prone because of it, because there's no litter to speak of. Yeah, I thought that was strange, but
yeah. So, in all your travels, Captain, did you ever hear anything about the other colony? There's like, other colony, dun dun dun.
Yeah, and that's where the episode takes a turn, because, you know, these people have no technology. So where did all of it go? Because they took a bunch of old technology and a bunch of new technology, and obviously these people are the recipients of the old technology.
And it makes me also think as well that because of the nature of them, like all the stories and things that they have, they must all be like word of mouth. So
Yeah.
like their history must be purely oral. So there are points that Mr. Odell doesn't know what a computer is, but he was able to ask Picard about the other colony. So, you know, things about sort of early Earth, like computers and advanced technology, might not have been part of their oral history because they don't want to repeat the mistakes of Earth. But they did know that there were people that came out with them that sort of parted ways.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Like, I want to like this episode, but it's like, it's the Irish potato people and the other colony people really kind of throw me for a loop, because they're, once they get
it's
there,
a tonal punch in the face.
it really is, and we have some more scenes of Riker doing things that are questionable at best.
Yeah. So he goes into his quarters and he takes Odell's daughter there with him, and his quarters are a mess, and she starts cleaning the place. Yeah, it's
uncomfortable.
It's cringe.
It's very uncomfortable. Because, you know, like, Riker has a lot of sexual conquests throughout the series of The Next Generation, and a lot of it is played pretty straight, you know, but in this scene, it kind of feels like Riker just took a medieval peasant out of time and then is just, like, soliciting her. Like, he took her back to his quarters on purpose, you know? It gives you a very weird vibe today, whereas I'm sure when this episode aired, you know, like, this was seen as, like, completely acceptable, but it's a weirdly sexist and weird depiction of women, you know, like, and Riker just doesn't add to it.
Let's also have a think about the fact that you're talking about a colony that has been basically independent from sort of Earth humans, Federation humans, for the better part of 200 years. So in that time, so this would be around about the 4th or 5th generation of colonists on that planet. So they wouldn't have the same sort of immune systems as like Federation humans, and vice versa. So if there was anything on that planet that was like a sort of pathogen or something that the people there might have been immune to, but the Federation guys weren't,
right,
or something that any kind of
alien STD
plagues that the Federation had gone through that they're immunized against, but these guys aren't. You shouldn't be just like randomly shagging the women.
Yeah, it just, like from an in-universe perspective, it's wrong, and from out of universe, it feels very weird with our modern like understanding of things. But like, you know,
It's okay though, because Riker's only just taken her away from his dad, so her dad can have his pipe and his mug of beer in peace. That's
Yeah.
one of the quotes he comes out with.
Yeah, that's another thing where it's like, wow, this really was like 80s dialogue here. Like, you know, it's not that I like have a super problem with stuff like that. It's just this episode is very much a product of its time, you know?
This whole like, yeah, so Commander Riker, do you not like girls?
It is, you know, I don't blame a woman for falling for Commander Riker. I mean, look at that beard, but like, it seems so, like, forward and sudden for the both of them, considering they literally just met each other, and this is, it just screams cringe. It screams cringe, and I really don't have much more to say about it. Riker, it's another one of those plots that goes nowhere, by the way.
I would just comment that the Irish stereotypes that we're talking about here, that there's a lot of sort of religious aspects to the Irish, like the Protestants and Catholics kind of thing, but would there not be a whole ton of like, you know, no sex before marriage and all that?
Nah.
In the well,
they're you know, they've survived for 200 years for a reason, and that's probably because they make more replacement humans than, you know, die. So I think they know what they're doing, you know, which leads us to the next colony.
They beamed up 223 people. But in a couple of days, there will also be 2 more.
Yeah, so these people are freaky, you know, they...
Yeah, so Riker proceeds to, inverted commas, wash her feet by taking her clothes off from the top first and working his way down. Look.
You know, I didn't need to picture that in my head, but I just did, and I'm uncomfortable again.
Anyway, let's move on to something a little bit nicer. In the cargo bay, Mr. Odell's building a still, but like he can't ignite the part of it to cook the mash for his Irish whiskey because he doesn't want to set off the fire suppression system again. So he gets Worf down there to show him how to work the replicators to get alcohol out of them.
And we're once again reminded that synthahol is terrible alcohol replacements, and the Federation people have all gaslit themselves into thinking that it's a good substitute.
However, in the Klingon Empire...
None of that pussy shit. Like, Klingon alcohol is serious business.
So Worf gives him this great big copper jug thing of stuff that is like, there's steam coming off of it.
You know, I think I had a drink once. It was like, was it a tombstone? And it had a similar effect because they put ice blocks into like warm whiskey, and it kind of gives off a little smoke. So, you know, it's not completely impossible, but
I've seen that with absinthe before.
Oh yeah, oh, absinthe. Ugh. So yeah, he
Worf
likes
gives him this stuff.
He's what does he say? That's a wee bit of the creature or something.
That's it. That's quite the wee bit of the creature. And then then his daughter comes storming in and shouts out his name, and he downs some more of it, and she walks right up to him, and he can barely speak, and he just goes like, "Hello, my darling." It's like, "Don't you hello, my darling, me."
I mean, they're to be fair, like these people are, they're kind of in a weird spot. They had to abandon their homes, and the first thing the men do is try to brew alcohol.
She gives Worf this massive telling off for like teaching them how to get alcohol out the food replicator. He's like, "You shouldn't have told them that it can produce more than meat and potatoes."
You won't get a day's work out of them anymore. Yeah, it's like this episode is so absurd that it's funny, but in a bad way. Like, it's hard to explain. I keep wanting to like it, but the more I talk about it, and like, we'll compare this to like Measure of a Man or Deep Space Nine, any episode of Deep Space Nine, and it's like, it feels like it was written by someone who didn't like really understand Star Trek that well, but wanted to write a piece of science fiction where some weird stuff happens.
So they work out that the other colony is about half a light year away. I don't have I don't have all my documentation about warp drive and stuff in front of me. I don't have like the encyclopedia and that, but I think that initially when warp drive was like developed, warp 1 was worked out as the speed of light. So
that's how I've understood it.
In Enterprise, they had the Warp 5 engine, but it wasn't necessarily 5 times the speed of light. There was a different sort of each increment was, different between all the factors. But to say that the colony ship that went out there, let's just say it had a basic warp drive on it, and it was able to travel at the equivalent of the speed of light. So it would have went on for another like 6 months before getting to its sort of colony site where it wanted to go. Whether that was the initial sort of location that it was going to in the first place, and maybe they wanted to have the other colonists there with them, but decided part of the way through that they're just going to drop them off here because can't stand being with them.
If they're anything like their descendants, I can kind of see why a bunch of stuffy scientists would just like throw them at the nearest M planet. Yeah.
So we hailed the dude, who is a very prim and proper man, sitting there like wearing a fancy white suit, a well-groomed gentleman. The absolute opposite of Mr. Odell.
In every way. Like, it's, and their first contact with them goes well enough. He seems, like, happy to see them, because they've been waiting for Earth contact, probably praying for it for
so he'd said that he'd feared that Earth had lost, was lost sort of thing, that... things weren't necessarily going too well. Maybe there was a Fourth World War or something. And the dude said that he was not quite the descendant of the captain of the original mission.
Because they notice he has the same last name, I believe, or...
Yes.
Yeah, so...
Which I didn't write down what that name was,
I didn't either, but... I thought that was interesting. They kind of foreshadow like that something weird is going on, because like if you have the last name of one of the people who colonized it, like surely you must be related, but they don't really go to explain that right away.
But what they do is what they do though is they get Troy to say her signature phrase. It's like, "Captain, he's hiding something.
Captain, I feel like he's hiding something." And it's just, Troy doesn't have a lot of actual screen time in this episode, but I don't understand why she can never be more specific
apart
about
from
what
that
she
scene
means.
and then another scene later on. That's like the only 2 times we see her in the episode, which is odd. You'd think that she'd be right down there in that cargo bay with the Bringloidi colonists, like sort of helping them to adapt.
Well, they seem to be adapting quite well. They're basically doing what they were doing on their planet, but now they're just in a cargo bay. But yeah, Troy, you think that she would be there a lot more, especially when dealing with people who have been put under a lot of stress and duress recently. Like, but yeah, I never understood how her abilities work.
They've basically been ripped away from their entire existence.
Yeah, she gets an impression from the man that she can see on the screen, but they're like up in space. Does her abilities have like a limit, or I don't think it's ever properly explained like how far Beta Zeds can sense things.
One that springs to mind is that there's an episode called Tin Man where there's a Romulan ship that is 20 minutes away from the Enterprise at impulse power, and there's a Betazoid on board, a full Betazoid, who was able to read the mind of the captain of the Romulan ship from that sort of 20 minutes away.
That's pretty far.
From
impulse.
The position. So if they were just in orbit of a planet, then even though she is only half Betazoid, I'm guessing she would be able to read something from the people on the planet.
I feel like she's actually, like, despite being only half Betazoid, I feel like she's very strong in, feeling others' emotions, because otherwise she wouldn't be on the bridge of the Enterprise,
Yeah, like she can literally feel other people's pain when she's asleep, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, anyway, that was an aside, but we should talk about Betazoids and other Star Trek aliens, and how we think they're better than human or less than human abilities. I'm thinking of like the Ferengi. Like, they must hear in like ultrasound.
Right? Because there's an episode of DS9 where there's a bomb and Quark can hear it, but Odo, who had been turned into human at that time because he had harmed another changeling, he couldn't hear it. So Ferengi hearing is better than sort of generic human hearing.
I like how we keep talking about other better episodes of Star Trek than this one.
Anyway, so the beam down, and when they're wandering about in the Prime Minister's sort of compound, Worf and Riker see twins in the compound.
Their
and then
compound
like
is creepy.
Another,
it's like all Art Deco and stuff.
Another twin shows up, so it's like 2 twins and a triplet. And then they see, like, was it the 4 dudes? There's like
quadruplets.
So Pulaski's wandering about with the tricorder, and she's like covertly scanning, and she confronts the Prime Minister straight away. He's like, about all these clones.
And then everyone is like, clones? 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 Like, there's 3 or 4 utterance of the word clones, and then we fade to black.
So the Prime Minister beams up to the Enterprise and says to Picard that when the colony ship arrived, there was a massive freak accident that severely damaged the ship and killed pretty much everybody on board, with the exception of 5 people, which is not the basis of a colony. So they very quickly put all the technology that they had left over together and proceeded to clone themselves because they didn't have a sufficient gene pool to breed. They would, within a few generations, it would be essentially inbreeding, and it's just not a viable way for humanity to live.
It's not. Like a similar thing happened in the Fallout vaults that did not have a enough population to sustain a gene pool within a few generations. No matter what you do, you're inbreeding, and that causes lots of genetic abnormalities that don't happen with a larger gene pool. So they sort of had they sort of are mirroring the other colonists, as those people have thrived by getting freaky, and these people have not been able to get freaky, and that's their problem.
Biological reproduction is repugnant.
I mean, so is cloning to a degree. I don't agree with, cloning people, but I do think that the actions that the Enterprise crew takes later is a little bit too much.
Yeah, so they basically say that due to the nature of them only having sort of 5 viable DNA samples, that they've been having issues with replicative fading, where their clones are essentially ending up being copies of copies of copies, and that they need infusions of DNA to keep their cloning process going. I've been thinking about this, and I think it's a little bit more in depth than you should keep the original sort of clone, and then you won't have this issue when you're replicating them. But I'm thinking that the original sort of DNA that they've had for around about 200 years would itself start to decay. Freezer burn would happen to it. The cells within the original sort of DNA samples would become non-viable, and then you'd have to get another DNA sample from one of the clones that they'd made, and as that goes on over time, that's how they're ending up with sort of wonky clones that aren't quite right. And I think you could see that in the behavior of some of the clones as well, that there's something not quite right.
They don't behave.
This is an interesting house
human.
you have. This is an interesting house you have, but I don't want to go into your kitchen lest I find out what's inside the pot.
I've never heard that one before. They all have, this degenerative thing, because at this point they are the clones of clones of clones, right? So they basically petition the Enterprise crew. They're like, give us your genes and we will make clones of you. And they're very disappointed when everybody seems to not think that's such a good idea.
One William T. Riker is unique, but 150,000 of them lessens me as a man, I think, is a direct quote from Riker, more or less, what he says there. I didn't write it down, but that it sticks in my head.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that he said.
Little did he know that he already has another William T. Riker. Thomas Riker. He's out there somewhere. He's still on that planet at this point, I think.
Yeah, I would need to send you this, but I saw a fan film the other day which touches on Thomas Riker and the events of the episode of DS9 that he was in. I'll send it to you later. But
I like that.
Picard says that so Riker saying no in such a way, Picard says that I think you'd find that attitude throughout my entire crew.
I don't know. I feel like somebody on the Enterprise would be okay with the idea of them being cloned to save people. Like, to save a culture from dying. That's basically what the Enterprise is doing. They're just, I mean, I'm sure somebody at from Starfleet would show up eventually and try to solve their problem somehow. But they have Starfleet does not look very kindly on things like cloning or eugenics or anything like that.
Oh, it's apparently supposed to be totally outlawed. Although going into the sort of the inconsistencies of this era of Star Trek, the second series of Next Generation, just a few episodes before, there was this sort of a science lab with cloned genetic super children in it.
Huh.
It's a bit.
Why does that
it's
sound
a bit all over
familiar?
the place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so basically it's a toss-up about how Starfleet would respond to these people, but Picard basically shuts that idea down before it gets anywhere. And the Prime Minister guy, you think he would be kind of kind of a fascist? They look exactly like some kind of Art Deco fascist regime. He even dresses like one. But, he's very reasonable, requesting more DNA for what they've been doing this whole time. But he doesn't even think about the solution. That there might be another solution to their problem. But,
So he does say that, due to the nature of the crash of the ship, and that his technology that he has isn't quite working properly, and he asks for the assistance of the Enterprise crew to sort of bring up the specs and get it all working again. And Pulaski's still a bit well, even if your technology is repaired, there isn't really any way to get around the replicative fading. But he's well, we have to try. It's all we have to try and save ourselves as a colony.
He's being very rational, from his point of view, which is cool. I like it when antagonists in Trek are not 100% bad guys, but he is kind of a bad guy because in the next scene, for some reason, Riker, Pulaski, and
so Riker and Pulaski walk into his office, and they say that the repairs are almost complete. And then he has them stunned and hauled off to his DNA lab to be forcibly DNA harvested. And then a couple of seconds later, Geordi walks in. He's like, "Have you seen Dr. Pulaski and Commander Riker?" And he's like, "I've not seen him all day."
I haven't seen him. You must have just missed him. Why didn't they take Geordi too?
I don't know. I'm guessing that. So in the next scene, it's Riker and Pulaski in sickbay. So this is after you see them in the DNA lab being.
Yeah, we kind of just jumped to sickbay.
Having the syringe full of DNA hauled out of them, but they're in sickbay, and Geordi just kind of shows up, and he's like, "Where were you guys?" He's like, "What do you mean, where were you guys?" He's like, "I kept asking where you were, and a bunch of clones just kept lying to me." It's like, "What do you mean a bunch of clones kept lying to you?" He's like, "Yeah, well, with my visor, I can detect the stress patterns in humans when they're lying. Doesn't work well on alien species, but years of being around humans, I can tell." He's like Troy when it comes to detecting lies and when people are hiding something. But Pulaski and Riker are like, "Yeah, well, we were down there, and then we walked into the PM's office, and then we don't remember." So it's they were having some kind of amnesia that only tripped when Geordi asked them what was going on.
And they're
So
like,
these guys,
how did we end up back in sickbay? Like, weren't
these
we down
these
the
guys
planet?
must have some kind of memory surgery that they're able to perform on people to make them forget things and only sort of remember it properly when the threads are pulled at.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they do kind of just like stun them immediately, which I feel like they're both clever enough people that something had to have been done to them, because they would have figured out if they just woke up in a random place that something was off, you know?
Yeah, so like it's weird because I've said so many times that this episode seems to be like full of weird filler moments, but then it comes to this and I'm having to fill in the gap of the story that they've been under the brain scan machine.
Yeah, like we're trying to find reasons
we
why
could-
we're jumping around from place to place.
We could have even just had 30 seconds of the Prime Minister just saying, all right, now do this to their memory engrams. And then it's sort of like, you see them lying on the bed and this little probe thing next to their heads, and then just a little musical beat sort of, dun, dun, dun!
You
And
could
then
have
the
done
next scene where they're in
something to
sick
show
bay
it.
and they're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, they just it doesn't really explain like how the progressing scenes after they get their DNA like worked out. But then, you know, Geordi shows up and it's like, it's just rather weird that they would leave Geordi there to be asking questions, because it kind of like ruins their whole plan. But I feel like the reason they didn't choose Geordi though is probably not because they're racist or something, but his eyes.
Oh, there was a black clone.
There was a black clone, but his eyes have been like that for a long time, right? Like since birth, I think.
He was born that way. So yeah, he's and this is mentioned in an episode where he's talking to a Romulan as well, that he's genetically defective, and he's like, oh well, on Romulus you would have been killed at birth.
Yeah.
you would have been an aborted fetus kind of thing. But yeah, so being genetically inferior is a good sort of discrimination for the clones to not want his DNA.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They had a male and female, like, and it's like, it doesn't. You don't really need to explain too much why Geordi like wasn't chosen for the cloning, but like, why did they just let him leave, like knowing what he knew? Do they just think their lies would be enough or something? Like,
this memory lab that I've had to think about in my head, like they could have took Geordi to that and made him forget.
Yeah, just anything. Like, we're filling in the blanks here because the episode doesn't tell us enough for each scene to make sense. But you know, after they figure out there's something fishy going on, they just beam down to the planet again, just
on an absolute sort of rogue mission with no permission from Picard whatsoever.
Right, because they the doctors,
Riker, Geordi, and Pulaski just sort of like, you know what, let's get to the transporter room and get O'Brien to beam us right down there into that cloning lab.
O'Brien might be a loyal Starfleet officer, but he certainly looks the other way when commanders come in sometimes. There
was an episode where I can't remember what it was all about, but Picard and Riker were just like, Mr. O'Brien, this is like off the record. He's like, oh, don't worry, sir, I'll just be in the corner dozing off. Was that the one where Data got the girl?
Yeah, it was the episode where the little girl was on the planet that was being destroyed. It was Pen Pals.
Right, and Data went down.
Another better season 2 episode. Oh. We just don't want to finish this episode.
They just go straight into the lab and they find the clones of themselves.
which is shocking, to be fair. But
hardly unexpected.
no, because they found out that Riker and Pulaski were missing some certain
Our
cell.
epithelial cells are missing.
Right.
Geordi, you're fine, but me and Riker aren't.
I don't know if that's a real life thing. If like you want to clone something, if it's best to pull a certain type of cell from the stomach. I can't really comment on the authenticity of that, but it might just be some technobabble, to confirm what we already know. And then they dust off the frost on the cloning thing, and they see that it's themselves. And the first thing that Riker does is take out his phaser and evaporate his clone into dust.
Which, in all technicality, did he just commit murder, or...
The Prime Minister calls them murderers. I think so. Because I don't know how you can argue that it's your body when it is now a separate body. And these, without even getting into like real life equivalents and shit, like a clone of yourself has the potential to be sentient and like a whole nother thing.
It's another part of that is when Riker looks into the second medical chamber and sees the Pulaski clone, he looks at the doctor and she just sort of nods her head, sort of, I'm giving you my consent to vaporize my non-consensual clone that's been created of me. So it's like, even though it's now its own living entity, is it still...
Well, it didn't wake up yet. That's probably the logic that they would use, but
yeah, so it might just be like smashing a test tube.
I guess so. I still feel like at the very least it is, if not murder, it's manslaughter, because you're slaughtering a man, and it might be you, but it's not you. I mean...
The Prime Minister comes in with his goons, and he yells out, "Murderers!" And Riker's like hell, you're a damn thief!
Riker is so justified in his fury at this moment. Because, it's weirdly off character for him to do that in the first place. I feel like if this were an episode in a season or two in the future, like, there would have been more consequences to what happened.
There would have been a conversation in the conference room about it.
Yeah.
Before taking action.
Who are we to decide the fate of these two innocent life forms? There's none of that. They just kill them, like, on screen and everything. So it's very much, in my opinion, it's against the spirit of Trek. This whole thing is very much not what traditional Star Trek is about.
Although I think in the whole thing that, going back a few scenes, when they're talking about the fading of it, and Pulaski's like, even with a fresh DNA infusion, you're going to still have the same issue. You're just putting it off. So it is about solving the problem, not just delaying it. And they go on to talk about that when they're in the conference lounge with Picard, that the issues of these people is a terminal one, and that there's no way around it. Even by getting the DNA, they're still going to have the same issue, and they've only got like a couple more generations at most before it's all over. So if the original sort of clones are sort of dying out, then the next clones, the clones of Riker and Pulaski, they won't have their original, the original guys would be gone. So they wouldn't have the abilities or the knowledge to continue on.
Yeah. That's what's the clones are not like getting about their situation, is that they can't just keep cloning more and more, because this problem will always happen. They have a hope that someday they'll find a solution to the DNA like degradation, or something will happen, you know, but it's honestly kind of sad, you know, like they've kind of put themselves into this situation by initially cloning themselves, but what other choice was there to just, like, you know, die off?
So then it's is it Pulaski that says that the sort of issue isn't about cloning, it's that they need breeding stock. And then there's this kind of eureka moment. It's like, well, what about the Ringloidy colonists? They'd be the
Picard
perfect match.
has the most shit-eating grin on his face when he realizes what to do with them, because he's like, he wants these people off his ship.
And that's Troy's. I think this is her second scene in the whole episode, apart from the one earlier. But she's like, "Yes, that's it. They're the perfect match."
They're not the perfect match at all, but, you know, it's like, they say that, you know, they started off together, so they should end things together, you know, like,
yeah,
they should help each other out, because they're from the same ship. But the logic here is sketchy at best. Like, I feel like this is one of the less impressive Enterprise plans, you know?
So they're speaking to the Prime Minister, and they've got Odell there as well. And the Prime Minister is absolutely outraged, and he's like saying sort of derogatory things about the Ringloidy, and Odell's just like, "Well, you're no catch yourself, lad."
Well, to him, the idea of you know, breeding is offensive because they're all clones. They think it's disgusting,
repugnant.
Yeah, but
so he's like, "No way, no chance in hell, no, not ever, nah." And Pulaski's like, "Oh well, Captain. I guess in 50 years' time, we're going to have a brilliant new place where we can form a colony. There's already cities built on the planet. We can just wait for them to die out and move in." Which...
that was cold.
Yeah, right.
That was really cold.
But I think that's the moment where the Prime Minister, it really sort of sinks in that, oh yeah, we're fucked.
Yeah, they don't have a choice.
So the only way to become unfucked is to, fuck.
Live long and prosper.
The fact that the two cultures are both so different, but the differences will make them stronger in the long run.
Right, which is, you know, it's the Federation, like, slogan, you know, they're literally stronger together because of their differences. And it's not like the perfect plan, because it's gonna have a lot of issues, especially starting out, but it's a lot better than waiting to die. And the Bricklecky can't go back to their home, so they're kind of out of options too.
When Odell finds out that basically he's going to have 3 kids by 3 different women, that kind of seals the deal for him, because he's a bit of a horny boy.
Uh-huh. Yep, he heard that and he was like, you know what, maybe we're not so different after all.
Send in the clones.
Send in the clones.
He spits on his hand and like rubs it together and goes to shake hands with the Prime Minister, who reluctantly does.
It's oddly respectful of them both. And then they, there's one last scene in the cargo bay, I believe. They go, because Mr. Adele has to tell his daughter about what the situation is going forward. And the Prime Minister, he walks into there, and this is like the first time he's like been around them, but he sees a pregnant woman holding a baby goat.
Holding the goat.
And he goes to like reach out to touch her belly, and then he just stops and he's like, "Oh, wow." Ugh. It's almost like he's morbidly curious, Yeah, the episode...
And then Odell's daughter, she finds out that, like, about how extreme the solution is. It's like, you'd be allowed to have sort of like 3 husbands. It's like, I don't want to be Eve.
I don't blame her.
But,
Picard does offer to let her stay on the Enterprise.
On the ship, yeah. And then you could take her to Starbase and she can do whatever she wants, following the Federation ethos. But she does choose to stay because her people need her. And with the Mariposans as well, they'll need a strong leader. And she definitely fills that role of being quite a strong and robust person.
Well, she knows how to get things done, and it's pointed out that even though these people are simple, they're very hard workers and they're very like industrious, and they're willing to learn, and that's basically it's while it's not a perfect solution for either side, it is better than the alternatives that they have. Like, I feel like, if we ever get a Star Trek series, like 100 years in the future from TNG's timeline or something, I would like them to revisit this group of people to see what they turned into.
See how they're doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Their colony is so out of the way that it wasn't noticed by the Federation for hundreds of years, and that I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have been bothered by any of the major galactic conflicts, because after all, it's only 200 people and like maybe 1,000 clones. Like, not a huge group of people to be on anybody's radar.
So the final thing that I've got noted down here on my notes, it just says accordion man, because as the music to the episode sort of like, rolls out, it's the Irish jig again, and there's a guy in the background with an accordion. So that accordion was either made on that planet or it's like 200 years old from Earth.
He was going pretty hard on that thing, I think that's what I love about this episode, is that, despite a lot of its problems, it's so absurd and funny sometimes that it's hard not to like individual scenes, but when you put it all together, it just doesn't measure up to something like, the later seasons of TNG or most of Deep Space Nine. Like, it doesn't quite reach those highs yet, which is fair enough because they were still trying to figure out, like, how to make the next generation and make it different than the original series. I feel like they kind of failed on that point.
Like, there's a similar episode, and I want to say it's in season 7. Basically what happens is there's a planet. These guys are like alien dudes. Their planet is falling apart, but Worf's human foster brother secretly rescues them and puts them in a holodeck, and basically turns them into a Federation problem where they need to be resettled. A similar thing, like the planet is going to be destroyed and they're all going to die, but he works out a way to beam them all into a holodeck overnight whilst they're asleep, and just be like, oh yeah, well, Picard, you better take them somewhere before the holodeck breaks down in 72 hours.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Prime Directive during this episode, because the Prime Directive, like, forbids contact with, like, primitive societies and stuff like that. Societies that hadn't invented warp travel. I don't know if...
I was thinking a similar thing myself, but the crutch of the Prime Directive is that it's about dealing with people who haven't invented warp drive or have no knowledge of warp drives. But being that this human colony was like a colony from Earth post invention of warp, the Prime Directive doesn't apply.
I guess not. Like, I was thinking it was just
I nerd logicked through that one as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about is Star Trek Insurrection. When there's the colony, the Baku, and they don't have any technology, but
browns
they did
and
realize
beige. Everybody has to wear browns and beige. Browns and beige. Browns and beige.
They did realize that the synthetic man has a phase variance within his positronic brain, and they just kind of look at them as like, these are a bunch of farmers. How do they? It's like, oh yeah, we dumped warp drive like years and years and years ago, because where would a warp drive take us except away from here, which is our home? It's like, all right, yeah, got ya. The Prime Directive doesn't apply.
I guess it doesn't. It's out of all of this episode's problems, the Prime Directive being violated is not one of them. So,
but the great big like no cloning thing.
yeah, I think, Picard says something after the meeting where they all agree that they're gonna hook up their cultures together. Picard says something like, I must be out of my mind. And
yes.
I don't know who says it back, but they say, yeah, I bet Starfleet might think so too. Or something like that. Like, and I just thought about Picard trying to explain this, like, event to an admiral. Like, well, we landed at one planet and there were Irish potato farmers and we had to save them because they needed our help, and then we found out about the cloning planet, and there were a bunch of eugenics cloner fascists, and we decided to hook them up, and now they're good.
Myself and Lieutenant Commander Worf were outside the transporter room, and out came flying a chicken! Would you believe it, Admiral? A chicken!
I feel like he embraced the absurd to a ridiculous degree. They needed an out-of-the-box solution, and they had one, and they took it. It's just, this whole episode, with all the stuff with Riker and Adele's daughter, was very weird and creepy, and it just kind of distracted me from everything else that was going on. Like, I really like this idea of, like, a colony from, really early, Earth development time in the 21st century, 22nd, like, I really like that idea of them, being cut off and then reestablishing contact, because their culture could have changed in ways that are more alien than even the aliens in Star Trek.
Uh-huh.
And they kind of did that here, but in a way that wasn't, I don't know, maybe it just it didn't really meet with expectations, so it's hard to like it, you know? Like, it's very hard to like it when you're distracted by some of the absurd or cringy elements of it.
Those sterile, creepy environments of the clone architecture, in contrast with
You know, Kermit the Frog on the banjo.
the pig in the transporter room.
You want to know something? I don't know how exactly, but I'd never seen this episode before until like a few days ago, because I've watched, like, I thought I'd watched all of season 1 and 2, but apparently I just skipped over this episode at some point because I probably read the description and was like, oh, that doesn't sound very good, and just skipped over it, you know. But I'm glad I watched it, because it's so weird. It really is, and it grabs you from the opening mystery, and it just, at the very least, like, it had my attention the whole way through.
I mean, that's something that I'd said in the past about season 1 and 2 of TNG, more specifically season 2, but it sets up a mystery and then proceeds to sort of solve it with the viewer, kind of thing. Also, the last two episodes before this was the one where they introduced the Borg, just to put everything in perspective.
Yeah, we'll talk about a huge drop-off. Like, I mean, the Borg are awesome, and then this episode just kind of failed to impress, you know? The mystery was interesting, the payoff was not, the solution was kind of infantile and weird, but it made sense.
Horny.
It was too horny. That's this episode's main problem. Like, if they dropped, like, the horniness, I could take the potato farmers more seriously, you know? Like, instead we just went off the walls, and I don't know, like, it's competent at its storytelling, and it felt like it wasn't just like a Monster of the Week episode, or, you know, like, I can tell some effort was put into here, especially when it comes to the clones and how their whole society looks and stuff. Like, those were all new sets they had to make. But it just it's not my favorite. I'd rather watch another episode of season 3 or 4, or any episode of Deep Space Nine, or even something from Voyager, rather than watch this episode again.
So I just pulled back a little bit on the Wikipedia that I had the episode list on, and to go into the production of this episode, it was written by Melinda M. Snodgrass. The story was intended to be a commentary about
Snodgrass.
Yeah, Snodgrass. That's her name. Have you never heard of her?
No, I haven't. Oh, all right.
The story was intended to be a commentary about immigration because she hated the xenophobic attitude she was seeing. The whole, we don't want them here because they're the wrong colour, don't speak the right language, or don't have the right religion. In her opinion, what makes America vibrant is the fact that we have all these cultures. And then it goes on to say that the episode was originally titled Send in the Clones.
Well,
but the title, to answer your question from before, the title Up the Long Ladder is taken from an Irish anti-Protestant rhyme. Up the long ladder, down the short rope, to hell with King Billy, 3 cheers for the Pope.
Hell yeah, dude.
King Billy being a reference to William III of England. 1650.
You know, I'm glad that we got an answer to that question, because there is I mean, it makes sense that it's called that, because there's a lot of Irish people in this episode.
Yeah, but it's quite an obscure reference.
It really, you know, in some circles, it's probably pretty well known, but it's I feel like calling it Send in the Clones would have spoiled the reveal of the Mariposans, too early. Like,
yes,
it's too on the nose, really. I do think that's the immigration parallels are interesting, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. But I don't know why. Like, I don't know why they had to go in the direction they did exactly. Like, if it was just about one displaced people like having to blend in with another, that's fine. It's weird that a woman wrote this, because it feels like something that, a man would write about how women act. But if you think about it, I guess some of the Brickeki, like, they fell back onto, like, traditional gender roles. Because, that's kind of how humans lived for, like, thousands of years before technology. But it's just, it's interesting. I don't feel like it executed everything, like, as good as some other episodes. I'll take more chickens on the Enterprise, though, anytime.
So what we need more random.
Yeah, if you're listening, CBS executives, just add more chickens to New Trek, and people will love it.
Just walk into engineering, there's just like a random cow just in the corner.
There's no explanation. It's like, oh yeah, that's Alberta there. She's a alien species that look exactly like Earth cows. No, I could get on board with that. I really liked how annoyed Picard was this whole episode. Because, like, Riker starts pulling his stuff. He's like, Captain, I think I'm gonna show her around. And he just kind of looks down like, alright, number one, you're thinking with your number one again, so don't, he kind of just gives him a side eye and is like, whatever, dude. He's so annoyed. His command staff is acting like children. Worf is, he's literally got the chicken pox. And that never went anywhere. That was not relevant.
Like I say, they just needed some random things just to pad out the episode.
Yeah. I don't know if they were afraid that, like, you couldn't just have, like, a few more scenes with, in the cargo bay with all the animals and stuff, but I liked that stuff. I thought it was fun.
The ship was called Mariposa, sir. That's Spanish for butterfly. I thought that might be helpful to know.
I don't think so,
what?
Data. It's not. It's weird because, like, when Data's doing that, Picard he's trying to understand, like, what's going on with the ship and the colonists and stuff, and he's just ignoring Data while he does this. Like,
yeah, and he's reading stuff, whilst Data at the same time is reading out the definition of what a spinning wheel is.
And then they see a spinning wheel inside the cargo bay at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know. It kind of not my favorite episode, but I feel like I want to like it, but it's held back by the execution and the weird vibes and stuff.
It's just a bit on the silly side.
Yeah. It's hard to take it very seriously. But I don't know. What do you think we should? What episode should we watch next? Because we were going to do an episode of the Orville, which I'm still on board to do. Because
yeah, well, I think that's definitely a good plan for the up next one.
Yeah, the Orville is just. It doesn't really matter. Like, it has absurd and weird parts to it, kind of like this episode, but it always seems to kind of tie it with a bow, like, it's not really you can accept it because this universe is crazy. Like the universe of the Orville is absurd and also serious. Like
Kind of partially semi, almost realistic. Like, are we allowed to have soda on the bridge? Our last captain let us have soda.
Yeah, it's departed from the lofty sort of ideals of Star Trek and embraces the absurd more. I feel like this would have been a good episode of the Orville.
When Seth MacFarlane and what was the lad's name? Malloy. When they're first going up to the Orville and they're in the shuttlecraft, and he's like, "Are you drinking a beer?" Like flying the shuttlecraft while drinking a beer.
He's like, "Yeah, it's a big day. I'm excited." Yeah, it's a lot more relatable. So, I'm gonna have to skim the Orville episodes again, because we just finished watching the third season like a month or two ago, and I've kind of forgotten a lot of it, to be fair. But I do think
Season was epic. I loved these like feature length episodes.
Oh yeah, 140. Speaking of feature length, we're about an hour and 40 minutes.
Well, that's the thing. It takes us longer to actually discuss an episode than the actual episode itself.
Yeah, and
I don't know how the replicated hat could do this in 25 minutes. I really don't.
The replicated hat?
Yeah, they're episode reviewers.
Oh. Yeah, they do it under like the episode's actual length.
Yeah.
Wow. It's hard to, because especially when we're talking about something that we like or something that we don't like, because when we talk about
maybe it's because we were talking about totally random other episodes. I remember that time where like this happened in this episode, and then
we were just trying really hard to skip to something that we liked instead.
Data's cat was randomly a he and it was a boy, and it was like having an issue and stuff, and then the next episode it was a female and it had kittens.
Don't worry, they explained
like,
that.
Not well though. I mean, it's obviously a totally different freaking cat, because like you could see it in its tail and its like color. It's like,
it annoys me. Okay, it gets on my nerves when the cat doesn't have the same coloration in each episode.
I think Data's he's having some kind of a feedback loop in his positronic brain, and that every single cat on the ship, he just thinks it's his, and he just randomly takes them back to his quarters. So that's why it's a different cat every time you see it.
I would like there to be a definitive thing with like all the different pets of the Enterprise crew, like known and unknown from like books and stuff. Maybe we should do that. Like, we'll just compile all the pets and who they belong to. Let me think. I mean, Data has a cat, obviously, but do we see any other pets besides like Picard's fish? We never see a dog, surprisingly, which kind of makes me suspicious how you got that uniform.
The only one time that I recall seeing a dog on TNG was when Q randomly turned Beverly into a dog when she was yelling and shouting at him, and like halfway through this yelling and shouting thing, he just turns her into like a great big dog. And the dog just continues like ruff, ruff, ruff. She just barks at him.
Oh, I mean, there's Captain Archer's dog, but that's not TNG. All right.
Orthos the Beagle.
I think we're gonna call it here, bud.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. I had fun talking about this episode with you. I know that originally we were gonna do the Orville, so I think we should probably do that next, because I've been really wanting to talk about it. I'm just a like, whenever I talk about the Orville, I'm just like a beacon of positivity. You know, like, I can't help it. I really enjoy Seth MacFarlane's comedy with Star Trek. Like, 'cause he gets it. He's a fan, you know? Like, it's kind of like how you were saying that, you know, a lot of the fan projects and fan videos are, like, superior in quality in a lot of ways to a lot of other Star Trek.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was a channel that I'd found recently, and I just gunned my way through like all of their content because it was all awesome. It was all set like sort of original series kind of stuff, so original series style sets and uniforms, looking 60s, but it was just so awesomely modern as well. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do when taking something old and trying to make it for a new audience or whatever the phrase is, like, what you should do is just take the old thing and basically keep it mostly intact, but have a fresh coat of paint, and people will love it, you know. And some people might think that's derivative or something, but I don't like it when I watch Star Trek Discovery and things look more advanced than they do in the next generation. Like,
Yeah, Discovery really kind of, I feel it missed the mark on that one. And people are like, oh, but if you made it look like the original series, like it would be so totally rubbish. It's like, well, how can the fan projects do that?
yeah, yeah, it's weird, right? Because you had to hit this balance with, you know, paying homage and also like making something new. But you can make new stories set in the old environments, even if it looks weird by modern standards. If it's a good show, people will watch it, you know. Like, it's more important, I think, that people like pay attention to the story, you know, rather than the visual effects. Like, the visual effects are good and they can be really good, but they're not the be-all end-all, like, of what makes something good or not. Like, not objectively speaking, because there is no objective of what's good or not. If you enjoy something like Star Trek Discovery or Picard or something like that, like, you obviously are entitled to that opinion, but you shouldn't be upset when other people don't like it. You know, we're not upset at you for liking what you like. We like things consistent and kind of the same. And I don't think that's such a bad thing, because you can mix the old with the new. It just, don't destroy what made it
Everyone
good.
has the right to criticize,
Oh yeah.
and that's okay. You don't need to go off on someone and totally hate someone just because they don't like the same things that you like, or they dislike something that you like.
There's a kind of a great divide right now between people who like the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, like the animated show, and Netflix made like a live action adaptation and they changed things. And a lot of people, you know, don't like the new one, or they like the old one more, or they don't like the old one as much as the new one. I don't know, like, it's confusing, and when I see fans arguing about which is better, it's just like, you know, that's not my question, is like which one is better. I just want to know if it's like a good adaptation, because when you take something that's a cartoon and make it into real life action, like, some things are going to be different. You know? And
yeah, there's going to be sort of it's like a translation sort of thing. It's
yeah.
You need to translate things in a certain way for them to work. There's going to be some things that won't, and some things that get cut out and removed, and some things that get left in. I was like that when I watched the movie The Martian. After being a massive fan of the book, I didn't really like the film that much, because I felt that a lot of what was in the book didn't make the cut for the film. It
Right.
lost a lot of humor from my point of view. The film was alright, but the
Well, that's
book
the
is
thing
far
is, there's
superior.
lots of people who have never read the book and they think that's a fantastic movie, and everybody just needs to chill a little bit and realize that, you know, like, we're all entitled to our opinions, and you shouldn't, like, judge people based solely on that. You know, kind of ask yourself why they like something. Like, I can't stand how toxic the Star Wars fandom is now because of minute little details that almost nobody cares about except for the fans, you know? And it's like, it's just weird how Star Trek is in this, it's in kind of a weird space where people still love it, but they're just not, like, they're not making as much, like, things like the classic Star Trek. You know, they're not making as many, they're intentionally writing things different, moving things around, changing canon, and I don't think it's necessary all the time. Like, you don't need to be weighed down by a lot of your canon, but you don't need to change things that are established. Like, I feel like the warp scale is literally just a way to cover up when writers don't know how fast a spaceship is supposed to go.
Something that really sort of irks me about modern Trek, specifically Discovery, Strange New Worlds, is that these are prequels, but they keep interrupting and shoehorning in, like, random things into, like, prequel canon. Like, come on, there's lots of other ships that aren't called Enterprise that would be on the other side of Federation space doing exploring things that won't ever come into contact with the Enterprise, or they won't ever, like, the people on board them are not, like, 6 degrees of separation removed from Spock and Uhura,
Right.
and Nurse Chapel and Dr. Mbenga. They don't even need to be, like, mentioned or anything. We don't need a whole backstory on Captain Pike, because I don't like...
How did he get in that wheelchair, though? How did Han Solo get his blaster? Where did he meet Chewbacca? We have to answer all these things.
Having a whole series about a character who has such a tragic ending is... I find that quite upsetting and depressing. And I must not be the only person who thinks that way about it. I mean, who thought that was going to be a good idea? Just sort of let him just be in the past and not sort of dig up the character and you know, every time I see him and I want to like him, I just then remember how tragic the character is and what's going to happen to him, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of depressing, and I feel like that's a lot of people's issue with new Trek, is that old Trek used to, at the end of every episode, we used to be lifted up, and now at the end of, like, every modern Star Trek series, we feel very let down and deflated and, like, kind of doom and gloom sort of thing. I know they're not all like that. To be fair, I've barely seen anything of Discovery. I think I watched season 1 a long time ago, but I think that would be interesting for us to dig into, you know, because we were a little critical of Up the Long Ladder here because of its weird, like, vibe and stuff, but I wouldn't mind watching something and being a little more critical about it, because I don't know, like, it's fun to talk about episodes that are good, that we like, and we can talk about that for hours, but I bet we could talk even longer about things we don't like.
We're going to turn into one of those, like, Star Wars review style channels.
Yeah.
This episode was written to be an attack against masculinity and Trump. So we need to rise up, gamers, and
Okay, no, I can't do that for
I
long.
hate this, and here's why.
No, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. But I think
Like it was so boring. Like I just sat with like my phone and played like Tetris.
I played like Tetris. You know,
I didn't even like pay attention to like the episode like that I was watching. Like
to be fair, like I watched the episode on my phone with my earbuds in about an hour or so before we started recording here. And I'm not gonna lie, I was playing Helldivers 2, which is why I didn't write down any notes, but I had just seen the episode a few days ago, so I was like, I was pretty sure I could remember.
You'd seen it recently.
It's fresh in my mind, you know?
I just sat down with my Sunday roast and watched it.
I would never want to get into a debate with somebody about something that I halfway paid attention to.
Right, that would be a dumb move to make.
That would be kind of a questionable thing to do. But I don't know. Like
even going back to our first review, where I think you were mentally prepared for it, but like I had notes and stuff as well, so it was we were at least prepared in some ways, and we knew a lot about the source material of Emissary as an episode, so we were prepared. We knew what we were doing, and we knew how to execute it, and we executed it quite well, I think.
Me too. I still like to go back and watch it sometimes, because Emissary is one of my favorite episodes, and I love gushing about Deep Space Nine, as I did several times in this video. But we should really give it a try. I want to approach Discovery with an open mind, but I've already been spoiled about a lot of things, so it makes me it's kind of hard for me to like completely come to it with no biases, especially since I really always wanted a show set between Enterprise and the original series, and I finally get one, and it's just kind of bullshit. Like, it's just for a show about Discovery, they don't actually do a lot of Star Trek stuff, do they? It's always about like saving the day somewhere, finding some lost hidden artifacts and to save everybody somehow. Like,
oh no, there's a war on, we need to the Klingons are going to invade the Federation, oh no. And then series 2, oh no, there's a universe-ending threat, oh no. Season 3, oh no, something destroyed the entire Federation, what was it? Oh no. Season 4, no, there's another universe-ending threat,
Yeah.
Waiting for season 5 and its multiverse-ending threat to be the finale, sort of, closing final encore of the whole show, because season 5 is the last one, so obviously it's going to need to upstage everything else that came before it, so it's going to be the biggest threat ever, I suppose, that's a cliffhanger every week. And
yeah, it's weird, man. Like, we have more Star Trek now than like ever, and we keep talking about the old stuff because I want to approach Discovery with an open mind, and I wouldn't mind talking about it either, but it's so hard to get excited for that. And like when I heard about Strange New Worlds, I thought that looked pretty good, and I get spoiled about plot stuff that happens, and I'm just like, why would they do that? Like, why are they doing this?
And again, the whole issue that I have with Strange New Worlds is that it's because it needs to be connected to everything else, and it can't just be.
It's like, look, a reference.
It can stand on its own. Yeah,
it's like ADHD brain. Like, we have to reference this and that, and it's. What I was good with as
literally a reference? The very first thing they do is they recap an episode of Discovery.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So it's set during the same time as Discovery. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense, I guess. Like, they have this whole timeline thing that they're doing now. It's weird, because I don't know anything that happens in most of Discovery, and I haven't even gave Strange New Worlds a chance. I want to watch New Trek and, like, understand why it gets the flack it does, you know? Like, but it's just so...
I'm just hoping they're not going to turn it into, like, this superhero saturation thing where, like, you need to have watched, like, 450 films before you go to the cinema to see the latest one, kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like we have, you know, it's called superhero fatigue, where people are just tired of all, like, everybody needs to, you know, remember this hero and that person, and, you know, it's like they're all connected somehow. And I always thought that would be a cool idea for movies, is if, you know, Alien could fight Predator or whatever, but, or the Terminator could fight Batman. Like, I get it. I get the appeal of having all these things happen in the same universe, but it kind of takes away from whatever you're trying to do, especially when you're trying to shoehorn in all these references to things that happened before. Like, in Infinity Wars, Thanos snaps and, like, half of everybody in the universe just disappears. And then, like, in some of the Spider-Man movies after that, it's just, like, almost like it never happened. People, like, reference it, but it's just like, oh man, that was weird when we all were snapped away for 4 years. You know, like, I feel like these Star Trek shows are kind of doing the same thing, where they just spin the wheel. They spin the wheel, but it doesn't go anywhere. You know, like, we don't learn anything new about that particular point in time that we didn't already know. They're just going beat by beat and doing safe things that makes it hard to like it, because we're coming off of things like The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, even Enterprise and Voyager, you know, had their moments, but I don't really get excited seeing, like, big space battles and stuff in Star Trek. Like, I want episodes to, like, make me question things about morality and, like, just kind of bringing up questions with no answers, or doing something different that I've never, like
the Orville did.
Yeah. The Orville brought up plenty of, like, moral quandaries in space. That's what I want. I want a show with moral quandaries in space. I don't want a show that is tacky, humorless, very over-the-top action. Like, the Orville had action scenes, but they felt tame in comparison to a lot of the stuff I've seen from Discovery. Like, now we've gone off the rails here, bud, but I think it's yeah, it's probably a discussion for another day. I'll tell you what, like, I got what is it, Paramount Plus, with all the Treks on it. I will start Discovery Season 1, and I'll tell you when I finish the first episode, and we could talk about that. If
Awesome. What we'll do then is, at some point this week, if you let me know when you're going to watch it, I'll watch it as well, so we can both have a conversation about it, sort of. We'll try and aim to be like the replicated hat and do it within, like, 25 minutes, and we can sit down and record it. And then we can blast on with that episode of the Orville as well for our next episode of Stu and Kadenza Watch Stuff.
Is that what we're calling it? I think
I'm open to better titles, but yes, I think that's a good ending.
Yes. I think
Untitled Random TV Show Watching Project.
I think it'll be refreshing if we do
number 3
a critical thing, and then we do something that we like. So we'll do an episode of Discovery first, and then we'll do the Orville. That sounds like a plan to me.
Most definitely. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, he has been Kadenza.
See ya later, all.
And I've been StooDogg, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.